thinking about starting your own DPC practice? This message is for you. Hint has launched the DPC Bootcamp, a physician-led, cohort-based learning program designed to guide clinicians through the process of launching their DPC practice. From business formation and operational setup to building practice management workflows and marketing funnels, Hint's DPC Bootcamp ensures that each crucial milestone of starting a DPC clinic is covered step by step, helping you build a solid foundation to launch and grow. Listen in as Dr. Elizabeth Williams-Dring, physician and founder of Active Health DPC in Pennsylvania, shares her experience as part of Hint's DPC Bootcamp.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Williams-Dring, physician and founder of Active Health DPC in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Our mission is to redefine primary care for busy individuals in our region. Through Hint DPC Bootcamp, I have gained confidence in building my practice while benefiting from a supportive community. The curated syllabus focused on business development, branding, and marketing has provided invaluable insights through weekly meetings with thought leaders and peers. This program has introduced me to strategies I hadn't previously considered, further enhancing my ability to launch and grow Active Health DPC. It has been an indispensable resource during this pivotal time in my journey.
The next cohort of future DPC leaders kicks off May 6th. Sign up today at hint.com/bootcamp. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
Direct primary care has allowed me to live my medical school personal statement as a physician. I have time to be human, holistic, and offer personalized care to my patients. It is hands down been the best decision I've made in my career so far. I am Lillian White of Empowered Health, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Lily White was deeply inspired during medical school by the innovative, brilliant, and wholehearted physicians she had the privilege of working with. Their approach to patient care ultimately led her to pursue a career in family medicine and planted the seed for the dream of opening her practice one day. Empowered Health is the realization of that dream. Built on the foundation of years in learning, observation, and mentorship, Dr. White designed her practice to embody the best elements of the physicians who influenced her along the way. Her vision was clear: to create a space where patients feel truly seen and heard, where care is unhurried, and where healing is prioritized. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. White.
Thank you.
So this is a note for all the listeners. Dr. White and I were just saying before, like, long time no see in a joking fashion, because I literally saw her about a couple of weeks ago at the Ohio Unsummit. So if you are listening and you did not know that there is an Ohio DPC Unsummit, you have learned a new fact today. So it's supposed to be around February of next year, 2026. So definitely get in contact with Dr. White, who was spearheading the campaign to get all the doctors together, medical students, residents, along with Dr. Jonas, who you'll be hearing shortly on the podcast. But Dr. White, I'm so excited to see you and chat longer today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, always good to see you.
So when we met, I think it was in person under the Big Top event in Minneapolis. I think that was the very first place I met you. And you've come a long way. And so I would love if you could start us off with this idea of you embody your medical school application in the flesh every day at Empowered Health. How did you come to this point to even look into opening your own practice through the mentorship and through the wholeheartedness that you saw in physicians you trained under?
Yeah, I was actually so blessed to be introduced to DPC early on in my training. So as a medical student, I knew that I wanted to be more holistic in my practice long term. I was actually between going to naturopathic school and MD school initially. So I'm pretty holistic. So I was looking for a mentor that kind of embodied those principles. And a preceptor connected me with Dr. Jonas, and I asked to shadow in his office. And then I asked to shadow again and again, and he kept letting me come back. And then he actually was a part of the early DPC movement. So he was helping plan the initial conferences and things. So he introduced me to DPC. And I just got to see in his wonderful example how it allowed him to spend more time with patients, offer more holistic, personalized care. He is also the medical director at the local free clinic. So how DPC gave him more flexibility to be able to serve his community in that way. He also did some medical writing, which was very cool. So just a really nice way to see like DPC really can empower you to practice your skill set as a physician, but also live your values as a doctor too.
And when you were the medical student and then the resident, and you were leaning into wanting to practice and build a practice that was holistic focused, but also facing the real world of in training, yes, that is amazing that you had exposure to people like Dr. Jonas and to DPC early. But did you have any, okay, I think that this is cool, but did you have any of those but moments? And tell us about those, because I'm sure that there are medical students and residents, whether it be when this is released live time or 5 years from the day that we're recording this, that those words are going to speak to other people in the audience.
Yeah, for sure. When I got to residency, I was very much, do I take a job or do I open right away or how do I make this work? And yeah, some of the but moments for me were, but finances, right? Especially going from residency. You know, a lot of us make resident salaries, so you're not saving up a ton when you open or when you graduate residency. You usually don't have a ton in the savings. So that was a big but moment for me. I was also taking a more active role in caring for a couple of family members, financially and personally. So that was a but moment for me. I was like, but if I took a job and I had a good salary and didn't have to think about the logistics of opening a practice, maybe that would be simpler. I think those were the primary things. And then I had but what about practicing holistic medicine and holistic care? And I just knew that that was going to be so hard in a healthcare system to have the time and flexibility and availability to practice those values. So, yeah, those were the big moments for me.
And now spinning this into your exposure to DPC early on, how specifically did you get those but moments answered or solved or fought back with the experience that you had under your belt because you were with Dr. Jonas, because you were with DPC patients earlier on?
Yeah, for sure. I always knew DPC was the long-term goal for me, so it was more a matter of when. And I had an elective during my fourth year of medical school that I designed with Dr. Jonas, and I just spent a few days with different DPC docs in the area. And I think this is a trait of most of us in DPC. We're all very pretty open. This is how it worked for me. Let me share, let me help you get there. So they were all very open. Some of them even shared like their books with me and how much they were making and how they made it work. And like just really the practical nuts and bolts of like how to do it. And that did give me more of the confidence of, okay, but actually this is kind of more simple than usually people make it sound, but there's just a checklist and you can go down the checklist and open a practice. You don't need that MBA. And then for me, I think part of it was just intrinsically getting that confirmation, that feeling that, okay, this is my next step. So part of that was just taking a step back. So during the end of my second year of residency, I was invited to teach a workshop on integrative medicine for some medical students in the lovely redwoods of California. And while I was there, it was just a long weekend. It was very refreshing to be away from the busyness of residency. And on my flight back, I was just praying about these next steps and what I wanted to do. Because third year is usually when they want you to start thinking about that next step. And I just had this clarity. I think God just gave me this clarity of this is your next step. Like sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and do what seemed a little hard at the beginning for that long-term dream or being able to live that personal statement.
I love that. And as you had this moment and as you realize that, wow, I actually know a lot about DPC because I've been envisioning this from a very early point on in your medical career. And then knowing that also you had those buts, the but for the finances, the but for spending time with family, needing to be able to be there for other people. if that were ever needed to happen in the future. Lives. That's the most recent thing that I
Yeah.
have been saying to a lot of people. But I want to ask about how those, plus wanting to practice holistically and wanting to attract patients who value that, how did that turn into a business plan? Because yes, there are checklists, but there's no other Dr. White in the world. So how did that morph into, I'm doing this, check that one off. I know a lot about DPC already before opening, check that one off. Now I actually got to do this. So how did you put the plans to the pavement?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of like the fun part. And sometimes the hard part, you're like, oh, I can just kind of go wild daydreaming here. What I found really helpful for me actually was I was like, okay, what can I do during residency? I'm not starting tomorrow, right? Like I've got a year of lead time. And it was actually just building my website. So in the process of building the website, it kind of prompted me to think through like, oh, what is my mission statement? Like, what do I want my core values to be? And like through designing the website, I sort of answered each of those questions as I went. And part of that was just spending time at the beach. I live very close to Lake Erie, so I go to the beach a lot and just like daydreaming, coming up with names. But yeah, a lot of it was just filling in the website, honestly. And that prompted me to then daydream on those specific things.
Yeah, love it. And I want to take a step back here and just ask, because you had exposure to all these DPCs, did you ever entertain the idea of adding on your expertise to another DPC versus opening your own?
Good question. Yeah, I definitely considered it. We do have a few here in Cleveland. I was actually during residency, I started my functional certification and then I finished a few months after residency. So I very much knew that I wanted that to be a big part of my practice. So it was a little hard to join a practice where I wouldn't be able to have like coverage. Like my patients would probably ask some like functional med questions and I wouldn't have somebody that would be able to answer them for coverage. And vice versa, if I was covering for somebody else, my style is just a little different. So I knew that I wanted that kind of independence, or I wanted that ability to really practice my full scope. And I tend to be just a little bit of, I don't know, an independent spark. I'm a free spirit. So I like the idea of like designing my own thing and making it exactly the way I wanted it. But yeah.
Girl, you're speaking to my heart there. So that's awesome. I love it. Now, when you were building your website, you mentioned your vision and values. Definitely right there. You can visit empoweredhealthdpc.com. But tell us about other things that were really helpful for the opening days in terms of potentially marketing to people, finding your avatar. What in those exercises that you experienced designing your website really helped you hone in on next steps? Stay with us. We'll be right back. Are you looking for the latest medical guidelines and research without the hefty price tag? Meet Open Evidence, the free alternative to UpToDate that keeps you informed with real-time updates on medical guidelines, research, and best practices. And here's one of my favorite game changers about Open Evidence. It will notify you when new guidelines affect the question you've already researched. No more outdated info, just smarter, faster, and always current. Join thousands of medical professionals choosing Open Evidence for free. Try it today by checking out the link in the show notes. Open Evidence AI. Stay informed, stay ahead.
Yeah, part of that was at the beginning, especially with building a network, was like, okay, I'm more holistic focused. I know I'm going to be referring to acupuncture, some more holistic physical therapy, massage, things like that. And I wanted to get a better sense of who's in the area, who's already doing these things. Because I knew who I referred to in the health system through residency, but on my own, I really wanted to challenge myself to get to know the local independent community and who was really best for my patient outside of just one system. And through those, I would set up these coffee date meetings with local people that I would consider referring to get to know them better. I'm also more of an introvert, so those big networking meetings weren't always the most comfortable place. That's not where I thrive, I think. But one-on-one coffee dates, love it. Love getting to really know the person, really getting to know what patients they value or what skills and expertise they really have. So I could have these kind of more curated lists for patients or referral sources. And then it kind of just serendipitously worked out that they got to know me through that. And then they were like, oh, let me refer to you. But yeah, it was very much the other way around at the beginning. So
I love that. And it makes me think about You're in this process of DPC, you're doing it, you're actively doing it, but they probably had questions for you too about like, what is the model? And I'm sure that that really helped you in terms of just honing in on how you described your business. So have you changed the way that you describe your business from those coffee chats to now? Because spilling the beans a little bit, like Dr. White's super successful over here in Cleveland area. So before we get to your success financially, as well as just having patience and fulfilling your dream every day, I want to know, how did you describe your practice to these people, and has that changed more recently?
Yeah. So I think initially I was focusing on describing like the DPC payment model to try and like give people like a structure, like, okay, it's a monthly fee and then these things. But really after, I don't know, after a few months of doing that, it morphed into really describing like, these are my values, this is what I offer. And then, oh, and that's all included in a monthly fee because that allows me to offer these things. So kind of leading up front with, this is what I offer, and then this is how I'm able to offer is through the DPC model has been very helpful.
Amazing. And if somebody's asking about holistic health, functional medicine, how do you describe that for people who they might just assume supplements or something that is not in alignment with what you do as a physician who's trained in these things? So, how would you break down for somebody your mission and vision and values through examples of how you practice differently?
I think for me, when I initially went to med school, that was really my vision long term is like combining the best of both worlds, like the best of alternative complementary medicine with more conventional medicine. So that's really how I practice. My initial patient appointment looks a little bit more like a functional med visit. I go through their health timeline, very detailed. But then I'm also asking like the basic family med new patient appointment questions, family history, past surgeries, things like that. So it really is kind of a combination of the two things. My initial appointment is a couple hours to really get to know folks. We don't always need that long, but it's been so nice not to be rushed. And then follow-ups, I block off an hour again just to have more time for that personalized care. And yeah, some of it looks like supplements, but a lot of it just looks like weaving in lifestyle changes or other complementary therapies that I refer to, like acupuncture, etc. But functional medicine really at its heart is root cause medicine. So someone has IBS, but what's contributing to that? What's causing it? Is it more psychological stress? Do they have post-infectious IBS? Is there another nervous system issue playing a role, infections, things like that? But yeah, it's really fun. It gets very detailed and it's been really just lovely to see patients healing.
And I just think it's lovely too that patients learn that there are physicians who are harnessing, just like you are, all of these ways to deliver and personalize care. And I've been reading a lot about on social media that people are like, oh, if you follow this person, fancy that they're selling you supplements at the end of their rant on red dye or whatever the fad is. But I really love that you have a community that you were building a relationship with, a community that also is starting to refer patients to you, but also that your community has your practice and your expertise as a physician who is also doing non-Western medicine ways intertwined with medicine in the Western sense. And for the price of a DPC membership, like amazing. And so this is where I think it really did not surprise me when you spoke at the Unsummit about your financial success. So can you tell us, because that was one of your butts, how did you mindfully keep track of your dollars and cents, your P&L, as you were growing, so that you were growing strategically versus, oh, I could offer this one-off service, or I could offer a personalized supplement or package services? How did you examine your practice financially as you've gotten to this point?
Yeah, initially I had a lot of pricing is probably one of the hardest things. Yeah, at the beginning, I very much looked to see, okay, what are the local DPC docs price at? Some of them were a little higher, some were a little lower. Just being out of residency and kind of wanting to build my confidence a little bit, I was like, I'm going to charge a little lower. Some of the higher prices just felt like too much for me at the beginning, so I started a little lower. And then I realized after a few months, I was like, oh, this is a real like value I'm offering to patients. I'm spending good time with them. Like I felt more confident in what I had to offer people. So I did increase my price after I think 3 months or so, partly because of that, and then partly because I realized with the amount of time I was spending, I looked at the amount of time I had in a year to offer patients. So minus vacation time, stuff I had, like how much time do I really even have to offer? And how much of those hours can basically, how big does that mean I can have in terms of a panel? So I was originally thinking more like 300, 350. And then I realized based on my time and how much I wanted to make sure I maintained availability for folks, because I want them to be able to follow up within 1 to 2 weeks, or a new patient is within 2 to 4 weeks. So to maintain that, really, it's like 200, 250. So with having a smaller panel, I knew that I needed to increase my price just a little bit.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. In terms of your owning your business, that is such a thing that it can be challenging for us who don't have an MBA. It can be challenging for us who have never opened a business or owned a business or run a business before. So when you talk about that you had the confidence 3 months in to change your pricing, clearly that was such a pro tip right there that Dr. White just dropped. Look at the hours that you actually have in a year and look at the patients and how much time you're spending with them. But tell us about that mind shift in confidence, because it's one thing to say, okay, the numbers are, and then it's another thing to be like, oh my God, now I have to let my members know that I'm increasing prices. That's a drama that many of us have gone through. So how did you put that confidence again into action? And how did your patients react when, oh my gosh, they're getting a change in price?
Yeah. And I would say I didn't increase prices for people who already joined, just as a thank you for starting with me and helping me grow at the beginning. So those people are at an original price and I've maintained that. But for new patients, I felt more comfortable being like, this is what I offer. And a saying that one of my mentors has is like, it's not for everyone. So that I felt more comfortable saying that this is what I offer. It's not always for everybody, but this is what I'm able to do. I also knew that that increased price is also helping me be able to take care of patients that I do discount much more steeply. I do have a few patients where I do that for, just because for various reasons, but being able to have a more sustainable price allows me to be able to be more generous in other ways.
So I will say this because literally this happened yesterday. I was at my old high school talking to the junior class in the Humanities and International Studies program. Shout out to Hispers out there, all about the power of podcasting. That's what I was there for. And yet these 16 and 17-year-olds were asking me about DPC as much as they were asking about podcasting, which I thought was amazing that there are teenagers smart enough to know, and probably sad that they know because of probably someone in their family has had experience with, that at 16 years old, they are asking super smart questions about healthcare in general. And one of the people who asked a question about, well, what if people can't afford the services? Your answer was spot on in the spirit of what I shared with that student, that it's your business. You get to do whatever you want. And if somebody is saying, hey, you know what? This month I lost everything, house burned down, tornado took something away, and you get to decide as a physician who is not driven by, well, if you don't come in and if you don't pay me in the way that the insurance company has designed me to get paid, then I cannot see you, period. You get to make those shots, because we are exactly the same in terms of, I have done procedures for free, seen people for free, because that's a decision that I can make as a business owner. So I love that. And it really speaks to, but DPC is only for rich people. Again, I spilled the beans a little bit earlier, but you have been financially successful already. So one, tell us how far you are into your own DPC clinic. I forgot to mention that in your bio. But two, how did you go about paying yourself through this journey, increasing prices, realizing how many hours you actually have to spend in a year while still taking care of yourself and taking off time from work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think finances are big, especially early on, but of course for any business. So yeah, I started off, I actually did some moonlighting during residency, and then I was lucky enough that they were willing to let me stay on doing like urgent care, just PRN, which was amazing. So I just kind of got to pick my hours. And then I also was a senior author for Core Content. So it's just a family medicine board review company. So I would write board review questions. So that's how I spent my summer after residency, was actually on the beach with my laptop until my urgent care privileges came in. It was lovely. And so those were the way I initially paid myself, were through the side gigs. So I had basically 20 hours of side gigs, like 16 to 20 hours of office per week, like DPC practice. And I always made sure to keep the urgent care or writing hours to 4 hours a day. So I had a half day either way to make sure I could get patients in. And then I just slowly decreased the side gigs and increased my DPC hours throughout. And so I've been open since October 2023. So this is about not quite 18 months since then, since I've been open. And then a couple months after I opened, so in December, end of December, I broke even, which is really nice. So keeping that overhead nice and low is a really nice way to take some of the financial pressure off. Because once I broke even, I was like, okay, phew, I'm not paying to practice anymore. I can just continue to build up my practice and be able to start paying myself. So I started paying myself from the practice after about 8 months. So I just let the savings build up initially. So that way I knew I had a few months in overhead just as like a cushion before I started paying myself.
Amazing. And what would you say is the estimate that you've put into the business before you started paying yourself?
So my first month I spent 3,000 just for supplies and then getting started, malpractice, things like that, rent, that included rent. The second month it was about 2,000 and then after that I broke even. So about $5,000. So I didn't have a lot saved up or invested initially.
And yet she owns her own practice, people. So if you're sitting out there, oh, I got to save $47,000, you can. Absolutely, you can. But you can also listen to Dr. White and rewind there and play it again. So tell us about finding your space, because I want to know here with the envisionment of a holistic practice, seeing all sorts of people, because you're a family doctor, you see all ages, all physical people who are homebound, people who are able to come into clinic. Did you always want your own space, or did you ever think about opening as a telemedicine model or home visit model in the beginning?
I did initially think a little bit about doing home visits as a way to start. I happened to bump into a friend who's a dermatologist at a meeting once. We actually got to see Amy Acton speak for a meeting, and we were both there. And she was like, "Oh, if you ever need a room to rent, let me know." And she's a local dermatologist. So that ended up working out really, really nicely. I was able to rent a room from her initially, and she already had all the supplies and the chair and a lot of the stuff you need up front. So that was just really awesome. And so that was just a good opportunity. But in terms of the mobile stuff, I did think about it. But at the end of the day, I realized just for my own comfort level, I liked having a space as like a young woman being on my own, like in somebody else's house who I'd never met before, just didn't seem as comfortable to me initially. But once I get to know patients, then I offer home visits and that type of thing. But for me, it just didn't work right away.
Great. And tell us about your space now, because I've seen pictures of it, haven't been there yet, even though I drove like right past your town. But tell us about Empowered Health in the flesh.
Yeah, so last summer, since the dermatologist I was renting from was moving and changing what she was doing, the opportunity came up to potentially move. And I was like, well, we'll look around. And I found this like incredible space. It's in an office building with a couple other offices, but it's got 4 rooms, a nice little lobby where you come in. I have a ton of plants. So that's always really fun when people come in, they love it. And then, yeah, I've got 4 rooms. So now I have a little bit of space, which is lovely. I've got like a basic clinic room to try and make a little more homey. I've loved trying to not push the envelope, but in some ways think about, okay, how do we really think about providing like relational human care? How can we make this as comfortable as possible for people or it doesn't feel so sterile and medical? And then I've got a room that I designed specifically for families. So it's got a nice couch. It's got a good rug on the floor that I can wipe down and kiddos can just come in and play. So I've had some parents say they drive by with their kids and they like want to come in and just play, which is that's the goal, right? Like that's like the opposite of medical trauma. Like that's what we're aiming for here is kids look forward to coming in and seeing me. So yeah, it's just been so lovely.
I love that. And yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, how often does that happen when a kid is, please, no, I don't want to go home. I want to go to the doctor's office because Dr. White has such a cool place. I love that. Oh my gosh. So thinking about just those first 8 months, is there anything that you would have done differently or that you did where you're like, like that did cost more money than I like could have, would have, should have spent? Anything that you can think of from especially those first 8 months before you started paying yourself that you think about that clearly doesn't matter because you're already paying yourself. So it's the coulda, woulda, shouldas that I'm asking about.
Yeah, I think going back, and actually this is something I'll fix in the near future, but I personally bank from the credit union, so I'm very used to like the no fees, very easy. And then I had a friend who was worked at one of the large banks, and I was like, okay, I trust him, like I'll just go through him for my business or my practice. Ended up being like a lot of fees and just, yeah, a lot of hassle. So now I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna go with the credit union that I have. I don't know why I thought I needed like a fancy bank. So yeah, that was one of the mistakes I made. It didn't cost me too much, but it'll be more optimal to switch over.
Fantastic. And I don't think that anyone has said that on the podcast before. So you're just breaking barriers left and right. This is great. Now, tell us about your first patients because you decided that you're going to open up your own DPC. You network with these coffee chats with people who are professionals and just people in your community. And then the doors open and you're like, no, this is like legit. I actually am open now. How were those first days in opening? And did you already have patients who were like, I already have an appointment with Dr. White when she opens?
Yeah, since I was coming from residency, I didn't have a huge established panel that wanted to follow over. But I had one patient, I remember I did open enrollments like a month before I actually started seeing people. So if they wanted to get on the books, they could. And I had one friend of a friend who called and she's, I'm ready. And I was like, oh, great. I wasn't really expecting anyone to call the first day. So that was like such a lovely surprise. So she got on the books right away, which is great. And then people just started trickling in. Those first few weeks can be a little bit quiet, but it definitely starts to snowball from there.
I love it. And why were people snowballing into your practice? How did the momentum get started? Because Cleveland, even though I said I drove past your town, it is not a town. I live in a town. You live in a city. How did you experience the snowball effect?
I would say my goal initially, I kept it like having seen other DPC docs grow and having heard their numbers. My goal was like 2 patients per week. And that's very much what it was at the beginning. And then once I got to about 50, that's when things kind of were more exponential at that point. I had enough, I think, time go by that I had seen patients once or twice. So we kind of established some rapport. And then they started referring other people to me, which was lovely. So that's, I think, the highest compliment you can get when a patient recommends their friend or family member come see you. That's always really fun. So yeah, I think about 50 is when I started to see more of that.
That's awesome. And was there anything in particular, like their own sales pitch about your practice that you kept finding people, like when you had the patient that they referred to you and they became a patient at Empowered Health, did those new patients say, oh yeah, the reason I joined was because of this? Did you hear something that was like said over and over and over about you as a doctor and your practice?
Yeah, what I've heard anyway, people tend to say, oh, she's very like more holistic. She'll listen to you, really take into account what you think is going on in your history. And I very much want to hear the things. I want to hear the history. I want to hear where people have been. And at the end of the day, I want people to feel like a human, like they're heard. So that's, yeah, what a lot of folks said.
And again, what compliments those are to have people who you might not even know who are putting their trust in you to be a physician based on the word of mouth that they've heard from your other patients. So that's wonderful. How else have you marketed your practice in your community?
One of the fun ways, I've done this a few times, like some community talks. I wouldn't say this brought in a ton of patients, but it was fun for me. But also, it helped get the word out about me in the community, just to build rapport with the community or my name so people knew who I was. I'm not just like this random doc on their own doing this thing. So it was really fun. I did the talk on sleep for the local senior center. One guy in the middle fell asleep at one point, and I was like, yes. And then I did a talk on well-being for the new year for a local CrossFit group. That was really fun too. And that's very much, I think, as family docs, like we love being in the community. So that was also just fun for me.
I love this. And it perfectly dovetails into my next question because with all of the time that you have as a DPC doctor that you calculated in terms of number of patients you're going to see, maintaining the quality that you have, you're still able to do other things. And I think back to the Dr. White who was very cognizant, like when you were helping other people physically as well as financially, that can happen again at any point in your DPC and you never even see it coming sometimes, but you are able to spend your time outside of seeing patients doing things like you are a contributing editor. Yeah, she's an editor of American Family Physician. So For the family physicians out there, you can picture it, that maroon logo, AFP on it. But tell us about, how did you even get involved in that, and what part of your cup does it fill?
That's been such a lovely part of DPC, is having the flexibility to do these other things that I enjoy too. So when I was a resident, I ended up applying for becoming a resident rep for the AFP. And that was like an incredible experience during my second year of residency. I got exposed to reviewing and editing and writing some articles and got some great mentorship. And then I had written a couple of blogs for them during that time. And then a little randomly, they reached out to me, I think it was last summer, and asked if I wanted to help write the blog. And I was like, yes, absolutely. I was so happy. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got involved with that.
Yeah, I love it. And I picture you in these community chats, but I picture this as a different way of doing that community chat, because it's to your peers and it's also providing a voice of an independent physician in a profession where most of us are employed. So I really love that. Can you talk to us about how that has helped you in terms of your own community, but also on the national side of things, to speak to physician autonomy?
Yeah, I think as physicians, when so many of us have become employed, we've got that other person in the room with us and the patient. We've got the employer, the business admin, so many other people in the room, so to speak, that you don't see. But that really plays a role in terms of how physicians are able to care for their patients and what they recommend. And I think we really need to get back to, it's a doctor and a patient in the room, and other people shouldn't be having a say on how we care for patients as much as possible. And that's really the direct of direct primary care. So I love making that such a part of DPC and advocating for physicians to be physicians and be able to do what they think is best for the patient.
Amazing. And I wonder, in terms of this time in medicine, when you are a contributing editor to this national platform, and we see physicians in medical school, in residency, in attending positions, open in their own private practice for 20 plus years, wanting to know about DPC. I'm wondering, what trends do you see that people are wanting more information about specifically? Is that, how do you do this financially? What are you seeing from your end that is helping other people understand that this is not bougie medicine, that this is not just for rich people, and this is actually coming to communities, rural, urban, et cetera, all over the nation?
I think a lot of it starts with even med students. I'm actually talking with a local med school tomorrow about DPC. So they're definitely leading the charge early on. And I'm actually working with Dr. Kenneth Q actually on writing an article about how to start your own DPC practice after residency for one of the big family med journals. So that'll come out probably in a few months. But yeah, we're making our way out there.
I love that. And especially not necessarily knowing where insurance is going to go when it comes to the federal programs. I think that we're having more and more people lean into, but my patients still deserve care. I can't either practice under the duress of seeing more people per hour. And I also want to do what I did, like you said, just be a doctor, like I went to doctor school to do. So that's amazing. I'm super excited. So keep us posted on when that comes out. And so now when it comes to educating others, I highlighted this at the beginning of the interview, but you have been instrumental in continuing. You're this group of Ohio doctors taking the baton and passing it on, but you were very instrumental in this year's Ohio DPC Unsummit. So tell us about the Unsummit in terms of its goals, because this was the 11th year. It's been going on longer than the DPC Summit nationally. What are its goals, and how important is it to maintain an Ohio state-focused summit for the people who are in your state community?
I think state involvement is huge, right? Part of that is just logistically, state laws vary. So it's really nice to have other docs who are familiar with what your state requirements are. But also, DPC is really such a grassroots movement still. There's so much of really learning how to open a practice, and support for starting a practice comes from the docs around you who are going to help you with covering with call, or figuring out how you get supplies, or this vendor that's in your area. So really having those local physicians and mentors is really key, I think.
I love that. I completely agree with you 100%. We were so inspired in California, specifically Dr. James Gore and myself, with what you guys were doing. We're having our first California focused summit in June. And so I think it does speak to that we need to know how to do these things within our own states while the movement grows on a national level. I want to ask you specifically because you were in the know about DPC as a medical student in residency. And now there's other people who there was a medical student, there was residents there at this year's Unsummit. How do you think that feeds the pipeline of family medicine? And I ask about family medicine just because you and I are family doctors, but clearly it impacts other specialties as well. But this is really coming from the myth that like, oh, there's already a physician shortage and DPC is contributing to that.
For sure. Yeah, I'm actually on the board for the Ohio Academy of Family Physician Foundation, and that's like our goal is how do we get more students involved in family medicine and going into family medicine? And really, I think DPC is such a huge part of that. Even for me, when I was a med student, seeing that you can practice family medicine in a way that's sustainable, you can spend time with people, you can be that kind of good old-fashioned family doc. What students are seeing now, the like 20 patients a day have time to address one thing, and then you got to reschedule, or they don't see sick visits, it's urgent care. That's not full scope family medicine. I don't want to practice that. So why would a student? I can't encourage a student to go into that. So I think DPC is a huge part of how do we encourage people to practice family medicine. When people see that they're able to do this, it's way, way more attractive, I think.
So on the opposite end of experience and fee for service, the medical students at one end who are very much, they're open, they're much closer to their medical school application and their essays, and they're able to intentionally plan their future differently than a person who has been in practice and fee for service for a while. So for the doctors who are 5, 6, 25 years into practice, when you talk to those people, family medicine or other physicians in the fee for service world, what are some of the things that we've mentioned, like DPC doesn't address the physician shortage, it's for rich people only? What are some of the other things that you hear from our colleagues about this model that we're bringing to everyday Americans?
Yeah, outside of the ones you mentioned, which definitely hear those a lot, is they're worried about some of the scope of practice, which is part of what the theme was this year for Ohio meeting. I was recently talking to a resident who was worried it would narrow his scope of practice. And actually, I found when I sat down and really looked at it compared to some of my other peers, my scope of practice is actually a little broader. A lot of the health systems don't encourage family docs to do procedures because they can make more money if they have a specialist do that procedure. But I'm trained to do it. I want to do it. I want to keep my patients here. Why would I send them out to wait so many months to get like a knee injection or whatever? So yeah, scope of practice has been broader for me, but that's another one I'll sometimes hear from people.
And I thought you guys presented it and addressed scope of practice really well because you talked about it from different perspectives. It can allow you to expand your scope if you wish it to. You can narrow down your scope if you wish to. It's your business. You do whatever the heck you want with it. So that's amazing. Are there also but statements that you hear from doctors who are like, I would love to do DPC, but I can't because, similar to your buts that you had before you nailed that coffin shut as to I'm not doing DPC or maybe DPCs in the future?
Yeah, I think the golden handcuffs I think are a tough one. And that's partly why there are some pros and cons to opening right after residency, but one of the huge ones is I was used to a lower cost of living. So when I got that pay raise just from working side gigs, actually, it was easier to make that transition versus going from a higher salary to a little lower when you're first starting out, perhaps, depending on how people start. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to priorities to some degree. If it's a priority, like there are some things maybe you can do to make that more manageable for you. But of course, life is life, so it's more complicated than that. But yeah, the golden handcuffs can be a tough one.
It's so funny. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Criminal. I'm part of the Criminal Plus crew. If anyone out there is out there, also Criminal Plus, yay. But the episode was about a security guard at the Met, so the New York Metropolitan Museum. And this person went from being, I believe, very high up there, working his way up the ranks in the New Yorker ecosystem and publication ecosystem. And then his brother had been diagnosed with cancer, and that really shifted his priorities. So when I was listening to that episode, I thought about physicians I've spoken with who are not DPC, but who are thinking about it specifically because of priorities shifting. And I think that that is definitely something real because we've beat that dead horse, but it's like lives. And like, what do you do to pivot? I was in the position of oh God, I don't know anything else but being an employee. And I'm being threatened with being fired if I don't sign my employer's contract. Like, that's crazy. I do think that this is a time where, especially if you're listening and you're thinking about what are you going to do in the future, finances, yes, absolutely. But also, how are you going to practice medicine? Is what you're doing right now in alignment with what you want to achieve at the end of your life? Is it going to help you get there? Is it going to constantly battle the what you want to be achieving in the end of your life? So I think it's interesting to hear those golden handcuffs, though, are a really big factor in a lot of people's mind shift or people's way that they look at DPC. And jumping back into scope of practice, I think about you on the beach. And also, I'm just like, I was in Ohio when it was snowing, and Lake Erie having a beach is just so. I think about Pacific Ocean Beach, and then I'm like, oh, yeah, like bodies of water have beaches, man. This is real. But I think about you on the beach, and I think about you balancing your time, doing stuff that is representing your expertise in a different way. And you're still able to, we mentioned you being a contributing editor, you being on the board of your state AFP chapter, but you're also doing core content review. So I think about Dr. White doing her thing on the beach and the fact that you're also a DPC doctor. So I'm wondering, thinking about core content and not necessarily the questions, because studying for the test sucks, but when it comes to the stuff that you really think is important for people to know when they're going into DPC, whether they're doing it with a holistic or functional thread, whether they're doing it exclusively Western trained, whatever it is, what are some core content things that you would say are important for anybody who is choosing to practice in their independent DPC?
I think part of it is knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and weaknesses and where you shine and where you could use more knowledge or information. I don't think I knew what a P&L statement was for a few months after I opened. But yeah, so it's like knowing those things like, okay, finances are going to need to learn more about that. Maybe you know more about marketing, so you're not going to have to wonder too much about that. So I think it's knowing where to lean into your skills and where to ask for help, mentorship, or in some cases, hire it out.
So now that you are a seasoned DPC doctor, because the first time I met you, you hadn't yet opened. That's why I'm just like, look at you go. But tell us about one of the best moments you've had practicing as a DPC doctor that you might not have had were you in fee for service.
Yeah, I had this young family I was taking care of. I think they joined within the first month or two, actually, of opening. So it was mom, baby, and baby was maybe 4 months old at this point. And they texted me one morning. Actually, she called me and she's got a fever. She's got this rash. What do I do? And it was just so empowering for me as a physician, one, to be like, come on by the office. I've got an opening at 10:30. Are you free then? And being able to get them in the same day, being able to triage, being able to have time to educate and like really help them feel comfortable with what was going on so they knew how to manage it and knew what to do next time. And just the satisfaction that comes with that. And then the next day being able to text and be like, hey, how's the rash doing? Just so much continuity of care there, so much personalized care there. Just felt like I was very much in my zone as a doctor. And that was within just the first few months of opening. So I was like, that feeling of, yes, this is what I wanted to do. And I'm like, it's happening. It's a thing. It was really cool.
I love that. And talk to us about one of your toughest days in DPC. What would one of those examples be?
I think one of the things that I learned, I think this was a little later on, maybe after the first year or so, is like being a doctor is still hard. DPC definitely makes it easier to be a family doc, but some days it's still tough when you have a particularly complicated patient come in and you don't know what's going on. And maybe there also some emotional turmoil going on there for the patient that you're helping manage. So yeah, definitely it's still hard to be a doc on some days.
And I'm sure there's so many people, including myself, who are nodding because being a doctor is being a doctor, no matter what model you're doing it under. And we all know that as people experience healthcare in different ways, fee-for-service DPC, like you said, the medical trauma is real for our patients as well as us. And DPC is, you're still a doctor at the end of the day. So I think that that is very, very relatable. So on a happier note, you mentioned that people love the plants that are in your office. So I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite office plant in Empowered Health?
I love that. I had another open house after a year to kind of celebrate moving to the new office space. And it was fun because I had my current patients coming for this one. And one of my patients had grown this pancake plant, which was so thoughtful and kind. They knew I loved plants. So they brought me this little pancake plant, which is doing very well, but I had never seen one before. So it was very thoughtful.
I love that. And because you love to spend so much time at the beach, what is your to-go beach bag / set of equipment that you take when you go and work on the beach and get paid while you're doing?
Love it. Yeah, one of my friends got me a nice yoga mat that's actually a towel. So that's usually my thing that I kind of lay out. And then I always bring a bunch of fruit with me just to have for a good snack because the beach is nice, but a snack makes it better.
Amen. Hangry is not an optimal place to be. I love that. So when you look back on your journey so far and you think about that doctor who was walking through the woods, teaching others about integrative medicine while on this precipice of, I could do the regular track, or I could do DPC, or I could do something else. And knowing that there's other doctors who are very much at that same precipice, what would you or what do you tell people to address their concerns about specifically the transition to DPC, and could that be a reality for them?
I would love to tell more doctors that you have a lot of worth. I think as doctors, so much of the time in large healthcare systems, we get underestimated for our value, for our time, for our expertise. But really, at the end of the day, you are a physician. And if DPC, let's just say worst case scenario, doesn't work, someone will hire you tomorrow in most cases, especially as a family doc. It's really not that much of a risk. You always have a job waiting for you, particularly in primary care. But yeah, you have worth as a doctor. Lean into that.
Amen. Well, we are going to be continuing the conversation over in our Patreon community. It's going to be available to all Patreon members, including the free members. So definitely jump on over to patreon.com/My DPC Story fan, or look for My DPC Story on Patreon. And we're going to be talking about how Dr. White has continued to really enrich her community through education, but in an interactive sense. And also, we're going to be talking about her mission, vision, values. So, Dr. White, thank you so much for your insight and sharing your story today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of My DPC Story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others find the show. Have a question about direct primary care? Leave me a voicemail. You might hear it answered in a future episode. Follow us on socials at the handle @MyDPCStory and join DPC Didactics, our monthly deep dive into your questions and challenges. Links are at mydpcstory.com. For exclusive content you won't hear anywhere else, join our Patreon. Find the link in the show notes or search for My DPC Story on patreon.com. For DPC News on the daily, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Conception.